This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to this special edition of the Glazov Gang. We have a very special guest this evening, David Kupelian, the author of the new book, The Snapping of the American Mind. And David is also the vice president and managing editor of the online news giant WorldNet Daily. David, what an honor to have you on the Glazov Gang.
Hey, Jamie, good to be with you.
Thank you very much. What a fantastic book you have written, The Snapping of the American Mind. And it's the weakening of America on so many levels, and you isolate and expose and unveil many of the forces behind this weakening. I want to begin this evening with you, David, with the subject of stealth jihad. You deal with this issue very powerfully in chapter 2 called The Blur. Let's begin with that. Tell us about the weakening of America in the context now of stealth jihad being waged in our country.
Well, actually, Jamie, I think the left kind of paved the way for the stealth jihad. Basically, let's just be very bottom line. We have a moral crisis in our country. Because of the influence of the left going way back from the post-Civil War, but really popping out in the 1960s, we have thrown out our core, what we call Judeo-Christian, traditional American values that pretty much everybody believed, 50, 60 years ago. And because of that, we now have the left, which has, as everybody knows, probably who's watching your broadcast now, is basically dominates pretty much all of our major institutions in America. Now, where the jihad comes in is that the Sharia Islam, we have sort of the two parts of it. We have terrorism, and then we have the part we don't see, which is the stealth jihad, which mimics what the left has done in America. Because if you remember, I grew up during the Cold War, hiding under the desk because we're concerned during the Cuban Missile Crisis about thermonuclear war. The Soviet Union and America each have thousands of nuclear warheads aimed at each other's population centers. That's where all the attention was. And so compared to that, having some crazy leftist college professors, having Howard Zinn's irredeemably anti-American history book, People's History of the United States, the leftist takeover of our institutions was, it's a free country. So this is what's happened with Islam, is that since September 11, 2001, everybody has been focused on terrorism, buildings coming down, fears of biological and chemical weapons attacks, and we have occasional attacks, thank God, not more than we've already had, the Boston bombing and so forth. But while that's going on and distracting our attention, there is another front in this war. I describe it in the book as a two-front war. And the second front is the stealth front, just as with the left. Islam has done the same thing. And I don't want to be too pretty about Islam, Islamism, radical Islam, Sharia Islam. Okay, Islam, we all, the obligatory statement is that we know that not all Muslims are terrorists. Yes, but having said that, Islam has not been a religion of peace for the past 14 centuries. I personally lost maybe 100 relatives in the Armenian genocide to the previous caliphate, to the one that's forming now. That's the Ottoman Caliphate in the Armenian genocide. So Islam as a whole has been slashing and burning and forcing people to join the religion at the point of the sword for 1,400 years. But in America, it cannot happen in that way. America is too big, too powerful, and still too Christian. So it has to happen just as the way the left has to take over America, slowly, in an evolutionary, not revolutionary way, gradually. And so you have a stealth jihad where we have institutions, We have pretty much all of the major Islamic organizations in this closely tied to the Muslim Brotherhood.
Okay, David, connected to that, let me narrow in on this because you explain it so brilliantly and profoundly the way you understand the left. Thank you so much for writing this book. I want to ask you this. You zero in on the Italian communist Antonio Gramsci and the way that he understood that you have to change the culture in order to defeat the society. And this is a Marxist agenda. They understood, Gramsci understood, and leftists understand today, you change the culture, then you take over. And this is what has opened up and made our society vulnerable to our enemies. Can you talk a bit about Gramsci's agenda?
Yeah, Jamie, even though the leftist revolution sort of burst out into our streets in the 1960s, if I can use the analogy, the termites were boring in the foundations of America for decades before. So going back to the 20s and 30s, you had something called the Frankfurt School, which was who were Marxist professors who moved here from Germany, and they decided that because they were Marxists, but they knew that Marx's prediction of a worldwide proletariat revolution didn't come to pass, except sort of in Russia. But they predicted it throughout Europe, and it didn't happen. And they determined that the reason it didn't happen, Jamie, is because of one really bad influence, and that was called Christianity. Christianity had been absorbed into the people of the world so much that they were not willing to throw off what the Marxists considered to be the shackles of class tyranny and so forth. So they determined that they had to really undo and undermine Christianity. So Gramsci, the Italian communist Antonio Gramsci, and the other people in that era, they determined that the way to do this was slowly, gradually, patiently. They're going to have, and the famous statement from Gramsci is, a long march through the institutions. They're going to gradually take over radio, there was no television then, and theater, and the churches, and all of our major institutions in society. And finally, when they did all that, they'd get real power in the government. And that's what they've done.
David, you show this, you unveil it, and it's happening on so many levels. And as you show the left and also the Islamic jihadists, they're doing this all very planned out, very slowly. Please answer, if you can, a bit briefly, because we're out of time, but I want to get to some really crucial things you talked about, David. The real zombie apocalypse. You know, you talk about psychiatry, the drugging of our kids. This is all interconnected with the attack on our foundations, on our society, on our Judeo-Christian values. Talk a little bit about this zombie apocalypse.
Well, I have a couple chapters on addiction and zombie apocalypse. I'm talking about the fact that we have something like 130 million Americans in a total population of like 325 million men, women, and children. 130 million that are dependent, Jamie, on mind-altering, mood-altering substances, legal or illegal, drugs, alcohol, just to get through life, because we have become such a broken people because of the influence of the left, which gave us the sexual revolution, which, we have 110 million Americans with sexually transmitted diseases, but they gave us the sexual revolution that has destroyed our families, given us divorce, given us such an epidemic of fatherlessness, and legalized abortion, all the wonderful utopian social experiments that the left has given us in the last 50 or 60 years. The jury is in, and what they've done is actually given us an epidemic of addiction and wretchedness and misery of every sort, suicide, mental illness, and I connect all the dots. In the book, The Snapping of the American Mind, I connect the dots between the big picture of fundamental transformation and all the big macro pictures, and I show our individual wretchedness and addiction are all connected. That's what's caused most of it.
Thank you so much, David. And there you go, the book, The Snapping of the American Mind. And you as you say, you show it all, and just brilliantly. I wish I could give you an hour, but I can only give you a minute. What I love about your book, too, is that at the end you give us some hope and a few steps that Americans can take, some of the things we can do. Can we finish with that, with a little bit of with hope and one or two suggestions to Americans who want to make a change?
Yeah, there's a lot of hope because there's still, look, there's you and me and everybody listening. There are a lot of people that still feel the same way, that have not, drank the Kool-Aid. Yeah, the end of any book like this has to go into solutions. And I have several chapters of solutions on the macro level, on what kind of changes we need in government and the country. But those aren't likely to happen soon, so I concentrate on individual personal things. I even talk about, diet and exercise and key things to keep your family, your body and soul intact. I have a whole section on giving up hate and anger and frustration, because this is a key thing. The left relies on us being so frustrated and angry and burnt out and snapping, there's the title of the book, that we can't function. And just knowing that if you read Saul Alinsky, it depends on your being resentful and overreactive. If we just realize that and say, okay, they're nuts, they're crazy, we have a war on our hands, but I'm not going to go through life upset and broken and projecting this on everybody else around me and my loved ones. That in itself is a huge revolution and changing, because honestly, if we're going to get our country back, Jamie, we have to start with ourselves.
David Kupelian, thank you so much for writing The Snapping of the American Mind, and thank you for coming on the Glazov Gang.
My pleasure, Jamie.
Thank you so much. The audience, our viewers, get The Snapping of the American Mind by David Kupelian. Christmas is coming up. It'll be a great Christmas present. Get it. And we'll see you on the next edition of the Glazov Gang. Good night.